A really powerful way of making your portfolio presentation assets your own and more individual is to use your own photography, to take photos of your artwork and maybe objects, different objects from the real environment, and use your digital skills to combine those things. Let's have a look at doing that. Flick over to Photoshop, and in our assets I've got a photo that I've taken, and it's of a tote bag. I'll open that up, and I want to add a kind of a logo to a tote bag. So this is a photo I took in my backyard, just in the shade. It's a terrible photo. It's the background is rubbish, but it's usable, and that's the thing about using your own photographs. You can really squeeze quite a lot out of just the information that you capture with your camera. And these photos, or this photo, is taken just on my iPhone, so not using any special equipment, just a quick photo on my iPhone, and I can use that to create something interesting that shows off my logo work or the branding work that I've done. Okay, so I want to isolate the tote bag itself from the background, put a new background in there, and add my logo into as if it's printed on that fabric. So to get started, we will isolate the bag itself, and I did that by creating a path, a Bezier path. I've done that for us, so you can see here in the path palette I've gone around and used the pen tool to select those pixels. So if I hold Command down and click on my path in the paths palette, it'll create a selection, and then I'm going to make a clipping mask. So already it's looking pretty good. Bit of a kind of a gross color cast in on my fabric there. I think the quickest way to get rid of that is to remove all the saturation. So I'm going to hit, well, we'll do it through the menu, adjust and desaturate. And then with the levels, we'll just kind of adjust the tonal range, make it a bit lighter and brighter, and we'll go okay. So that's looking good. The other thing at this stage that I'm going to do, let's continue on. We'll put in a background, and so I think this is going to have a kind of a green theme, something like that. Adding some green in there with a solid color. Looking good. Now, the good thing with using Photoshop is that we can create reusable assets. So if I'm putting all the work into creating a mock-up with this bag, I might want to use it again in the future. So we can use some features in Photoshop to make something that's reusable and shareable. We do that with smart objects. So let's set up the smart object part of this. To start with, I'll just make a selection around the area where I want my artwork to be printed on this tote bag, and I'll fill that. I'll just make a new layer and fill that with just with some color, like so. And then I'm going to convert that into, so I've right-clicked on the layer name, convert to a smart object. So that's basically creating a Photoshop file inside a Photoshop layer. I'm going to call this "Put Your Artwork Here," just so I remember that's where my artwork goes. If I double click on that, it'll open up that new layer, and if I've got some text in there, like so, and I'll save that file, close it, you'll see that it's updated in my original tote bag. Okay, what should we do next? So we've got our layer in there. We'll just open that up quickly and we'll add a little bit more sort of placeholder. I'm going to add a circle. It's not going to have a fill, but it is going to have a stroke. I'm going to make it reasonably big. Make the text a bit smaller. So this is just placeholder text, and I'll turn off the background, and then we'll save this file again. And you can see that's updated there. So that's looking good. I would like our text to kind of contour to the folds and the ripples of the bag a little bit. So what I'm going to do is create a displacement map for that. So a displacement map is a completely separate PSD file that records that grayscale information, and we can use that those pixels to deform a layer using a plugin or an effect. So let's create that. I'm going to save off a copy of this. Save a copy, and it's going to be a Photoshop file. We don't need a color profile. Save a copy, that's what I want to do. I'll pop this on the desktop. I'm going to call this our displacement. Now I don't need any layers for that, and I'll click save. Oh, that's unfortunate. Hang on a tick there, everybody. That's my old RMIT machine filling up. We'll see if we can save that bump map again. Desktop, fingers crossed. As a copy, no layers. Alright, just emptied the bin there, and I've got just a couple of extra megabytes. Let's open up that file that I just saved. Alright, now I'm going to flatten it. Flatten image. That's good, and I'm going to increase the contrast just a little bit. So what we want is kind of a bit more of that grayscale, so there's high ends, a bit more black, a bit more light. Something like that, and we also want to blur it. So I'm going to go to blur, Gaussian blur, and punch up the blur a little bit so we've got something like that. Alright, and you'll see why I'm doing this in a second. We'll go OK, and save that file. go back over to our displacement map here, and we'll turn back on our other layers, and we're going to affect our smart object over here. So we'll go to filter, we'll go to distort, and we'll go to displace. I think we'll leave it at 10. We'll click OK, and that's going to ask us to find a file to use as our displacement. And we'll open that. And you can see that it's kind of subtle, but you can see that now our text is sort of undulating within the folds and confines of those pixels. If I just pull that down, kind of gives us a bit more of a natural feel to the way that these two files are kind of mingling together. So to modify that, you'll want to change the blur and the contrast of your displacement file, and you can also change the amount of effect in pixels when you're applying the displacement. Now I'm going to leave it at that and continue on with our project. I want to include my own artwork in here. So I'm going to go over to Illustrator and grab the file that I want to include. It's this building file. I'm going to copy that artwork, head back over to Photoshop, and then double click on my artwork file, and I'm going to paste my logo in here and paste it as a shape layer. Turn all this other stuff off and see if we can match a kind of a green. Oops. So I'm using a shape layer. Save that, head back over to our artwork, and you can see that that's been updated. Kind of looks quite good with that V's sort of folding around that edge there. I want to make it a little bit smaller than that. It's taking up too much of the space. Oops. Make it a bit higher. Save that, and that'll update over here on our page. So some things that we can do to match this in a little bit more. I could drop the opacity so that it's sort of blending with the background a little bit, or add a blend mode so that we can pick out some of those folds underneath. And the last thing I'm going to do is add a little bit of a drop shadow to our bag itself so that it's sort of sitting off the background a little bit more. So there's my drop shadow implemented. So you can see that with even some very rudimentary photographic information, you can create something kind of interesting if you just clean it up a little bit and use the best possible aspects of those pixels. You can create something that's highly bespoke and personalized.